Just gonna jump right in. So I want to help everyone here and everyone who's watching to just be more effective in everything that you do. A lot of people talk about efficiency, but a lot of times just being effective at things goes unsaid. Just stepping back a bit of background on myself. So I went for undergrad to U of M, big football fan. I then did a master's in finance at Imperial in London, so kind of rounding out that engineering and business side of things. I then worked at a big tech company in India for many years, this company Reliance Geo. So we were working on internet access and digital products and services in India. So we actually launched 4G in India. It was a big deal in India. We had about 100 million customers in the first 3 months after we launched, which was the fastest rollout of 4G. So that was really exciting. That was my first time being a product manager. So I got about 4 years of product management there, worked on a lot of our self-care applications and things, and got my hands dirty on some of these concepts that I've been using ever since. Since then, I decided to go and do business school, like every engineer thinks about doing. So I went to school in Boston. I went to Harvard. While I was in business school, one of the things I really took advantage of was doing a lot of internships. So I worked at Google last or 2 summers ago out here in the Bay Area. I worked at this blockchain company called Saya in Boston itself for a few months. And then I also worked on this startup with a friend of mine at business school called Struck Club. And that was, so I got a big spectrum of things from, Google size to kind of startup, 3-4 people size, and figuring out where I want to be. I'm a product manager at Okta. So I've been there for about 9 months now. Okta is a single sign-on and identity platform. So we do a lot of solutions for businesses, for IT admins, helping them automate a lot of that stuff. And I specifically work on device-based access management. So that's just a bit of my background, but let's jump right in. So just to kind of set the stage, I was doing some research on what do product leaders really think about and what do they actually worry about a lot of the time. No surprise, it's prioritization. So what I was actually surprised about was the actual percentages of more than 50% of product leaders say that prioritization is their biggest sort of worry or pain point, or the biggest thing that they're constantly thinking about. And what that means is that it's not specifically about a specific product or feature, but it's all about how do you sort of set that up and how do you decide what to work on. Also, as I go along this presentation, I've put in some book recommendations as I go, so I'll briefly touch upon those. These are 2 big favorites of mine, and I'd highly recommend them to anyone looking at sort of thinking about this space. So first, before we get into prioritization itself, let's talk about what do you need as prerequisites kind of to get to prioritization. The first thing I'd say is you need to set a vision for your company, vision for your product group, vision for your feature, just a vision sort of generally for where you want to go. Because without a vision, you don't know if you're being effective towards a particular vision or not, or if you're just being efficient in getting nowhere. Again, another book recommendation, Product Leadership. This has been one of my favorites. It really talks about the leadership principles and things that a lot of product leaders use out there. Second thing that you need before you prioritize is getting the ideas in. As PMs, a lot of people think that we need to think of all the ideas, come up with everything, decide, what everything is going to be, what are the actual things that the product is going to focus on, or what are we going to actually implement. I found it actually the other way around, where I am more of a filter for the ideas. The ideas come from sales, they come from customers, marketing, other people in the organization, engineers, and I need to put all of these ideas together to then prioritize them. So kind of get all those ideas in so that you have something to prioritize, actually. Innovator Solution, I actually took his course at business school. Highly recommend that book as well. It's kind of framework inception. So this is a framework for frameworks. I'm going to go through a few of these frameworks, but this is something that I found out there that talks about all the different frameworks that are out there for prioritization. I think the takeaway on this slide really is that there is no one size fits all. There's a bunch of different methods to prioritize out there. Some are very quantitative, some are qualitative, some are internally focused, some are externally focused. So there's different methods that you can use for different circumstances and different situations. Just being aware that there are multiple methods out there can help you get that overall view. And some things might work in some situations and some might work in others. But just high level, there's a lot of frameworks out there, so be aware of that. As I go through these, I'm going to give examples of us as a pizza shop. Anyone who had a early lunch, I'm sorry. So the first thing is Kano model. This is something that I use for some situations. So let me quickly go through the model itself. What the model says is that any or all feature sets and all products and features can fit into 3 different buckets. And I think there's a 4th one also. So the first bucket is basic expectations. These are just things that customers expect, and if you don't have them in your product, it's actually a negative satisfaction or dissatisfaction to not have these. And just having them is more like a hygiene factor where it gets you to a baseline satisfaction. Then you have satisfiers, which are things that it's kind of a linear graph where as you invest more in these, you get more out of them and you get more satisfaction for the customers. And then the third bucket is delighters, where you have to really invest a lot into these, but then the satisfaction is really exponential for customers. Just some quick examples. So for basic expectations, it's kind of like a pizza which isn't cut. That just like pisses me off, but you need to cut the pizza for someone to enjoy the pizza, but nobody's going to be like, hey, this pizza is cut really well. It's just the basic expectation. Satisfiers are more like the ingredients that you put in. So the better the ingredients you put in, the better the satisfaction is going to be for the customers. The delighters is, and this is actually something I saw on Shark Tank, it's called Green Box. It's a box which itself becomes plates to eat out of. So you don't need extra plates, you just take the pizza and you're ready to go. If you have pizza leftovers, it also converts into a sort of mini box which you can keep in the fridge or keep and carry with you. The fourth bucket that I talked about is something that's sort of indifferent. So this is something that no matter how much you invest in or don't invest in, it doesn't really matter to the customers. So just from a pizza point of view, it doesn't matter to the customers how I deliver it to them. It doesn't matter if I use a bike or a van, etc. Those aren't things that the customer is looking for. So any product or feature that you're thinking about, you should first bucket them into one of these 4. And the reason why this is a quantitative framework is because you want to then graph all of these onto some sort of framework like this, where you do some sort of analysis of how much do we really need to invest to get this feature, and then how much do we think this is going to satisfy customers. The next one is pretty straightforward one. So this is more on the qualitative side. It's called Moscow. So this stands for must, should, could, and won't. Essentially 4 buckets of things into which you want to put your products or features. Going with the pizza model again, so having a good chef is really a must for a pizza shop. Having a wood-fired pizza and really good ingredients is kind of a should. Having drinks and garlic bread and other things is kind of like a could. And then based on the vision that you've set, maybe pasta and drinks are just the won't, things that you won't do. The important thing to note is that the limitation of this framework is that within each bucket itself, there's no priorities set. So for example, in the should bucket, I don't know if I should invest in the wood-fired pizza oven first, or if I should invest in the good ingredients first. So that's just a limitation to be aware of, but this is more of a high-level prioritization. We use this a lot for bugs, kind of saying, hey, is this a P0, P1, P2, or P3 bug? And that matches with the 4 categories here. And then you would use some other framework to decide between the buckets, or within the bucket itself. The third one is kind of moving to the internal and quantitative side of things, is a deep financial analysis of the product. This itself is a DCF, or direct discounted cash flow. And what you want to get out of this is the net present value of each product. So this is, of course, very detailed. The limitation on this one is that the model itself involves making a lot of assumptions, and a lot of those assumptions are things that might or might not be true. These are things that are used in the stock market every day, and of course there's nobody who invests who knows exactly the value of anything. So it's kind of more directional rather than giving you an exact number, but the important thing is that things that have a higher net present value should be the things that you invest in first, and then go down the line that way. A book that I read on valuation, this is kind of the Bible for valuation if anyone's interested. This does go pretty deep, but if you're interested in just the sort of high level, the first few chapters should help you, and it gives a really good overview of the concept. The fourth framework that I want to talk about is the Systemico model. So what this model does is break things down into user goals and engagement levels. So what you do is horizontally you list out all the user goals that you want to meet with your product. So going with the examples again, this could be I want to have good pizza, I want to have good delivery, and I want to have good drinks. So these are the 3 goals that I want to meet with my pizza shop. On the vertical axis, what you have is different engagement levels. So you have core engagement levels, which is essentially base level engagement, where think of this as the minimum viable product, or the MVP. This is the minimum set of things that you need for someone to use your product. Beyond that is use, which is something if you want to get to the next level where the customer is actually using your product and going deep into them. The third one is engaged. We talk about Snapchat having very engaged customers. That's because they have delivered some of those features at that level. And then the fourth one is explore, where they're not just using and engaging with the product, but they're actually exploring all the different aspects of it. They're trying things out. They're going to the menus, which normal customers don't go to. The prioritization in this framework essentially gives you saying you want to first address the core set of use cases or the core set of features for all use cases, and then move on to the next engagement level for all use cases. So you want to kind of fill out each use case at the same level before going to the next level. You can also think of these as releases, and that follows the same thing as prioritization. Just kind of, I know there was a lot of frameworks. I don't sort of think it's valuable to go and remember and understand every single framework out there. this is just high leveling all of these frameworks itself, saying what is your objective when you do prioritization is to just maximize the value for your cost. So how much impact am I going to get for a certain level of investment? I want to first go for the things which are low cost, high value, and then sort of move down the chain that way. Every prioritization framework is essentially a different way of getting to a list of these things. This is a really interesting book, The Mythical Man Month. This is for anyone who isn't a computer science engineer like me, this is a really good overview of computer science and talks about what does it actually mean to develop software, and it'll give you a way to kind of estimate costs of things and investments of things, especially today where everything is software based and a lot of things are agile. This book is very helpful. Kind of summing all of this up now, how do you actually go and implement these things? So it's really important to go and actually practice these things. This is an iterative process, so it's not like you set your priorities and your prioritization list once and you're done, because things keep changing, you keep getting new information, customers start screaming at you for different things, the field needs different stuff, markets change, competitors change. So the point here is that you need to constantly keep going through this loop, and having this running at the back of your mind is saying, are the priorities that I've set the correct ones? Does this new information change anything for me? How do I incorporate this new information to change priorities and convey that to the team? One of the reasons I like this diagram itself is because it has a aspect of luck in there. So not everything comes out as you expected. There's luck, there's market fluctuations, there's things out of your control that happen. So it's not important to see, okay, I built this and it didn't succeed, so my prioritization was wrong. That's something that's called resulting. You don't want to you don't want to judge your prioritization or your decision based on the result of that decision, because that result depends on not just your decision but also on luck. You want to look back and say, hey, with the information that I had at the time, I made the right decision. There was some other thing out of my control that resulted in this not working out. And this diagram itself is from this book, Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. She's a professional poker player that I've been following for many years. So she essentially talks about how a lot of decisions in management, and this goes beyond product management, but a lot of decisions in management or decisions in general are like thinking in bets. So like at a poker table, you're betting, but then there's still cards to be played. You don't know what the other person has, but you still need to make a decision based on the information that you have. And then what comes out at the end might be what you intended or not, but that's not the way to judge your decisions. Finally, how do you put all of this together and how do you put all of this in use? In the title, I promised that this wasn't just about products. This was also things that you can apply to other parts of your life. So I use some of this thinking and some of these concepts to prioritize the list of books that I read. I have a list of 74 books on my list, but I'm constantly kind of thinking about what's the next book I want to read. I'm investing my time, obviously, reading these books. So what's the most value I can get out of my investment? There's also, I don't necessarily think about getting or just going down the list, because if I've gotten a bunch of product management books recently, maybe I'll switch over to fiction, maybe I'll switch over to other things, but it's all about kind of the vision that I've set for myself, which is, learning in specific areas and gaining more knowledge on these things. And when I feel like I've got those, I switch over to the next thing on my list. It's things that you can apply. These concepts can be applied to list of restaurants that you want to visit. Your time is limited, your money is limited. So what are those restaurants that you want to visit? Your calendar. This is from my week, and your time again is limited. So you want to really think about: is this meeting helpful? Is everyone in this meeting adding value? Am I adding value, or can this be something that can be sent out as an update over email? So the idea is be ruthless about prioritization. Always be thinking about prioritization. Always be thinking about how you want to get the most value out of your time and out of everyone's time. And you can start with small things like your calendar or books, etc., and build up this skill as you go forward and apply these things to other parts of your life and your career, and become a great product manager. I want to end on this quote. So this is something that Bruce Lee talked about. Not many people know that Bruce Lee was a big philosopher, but essentially what this quote is saying is that before I learned the art, a punch was just a punch. After I learned the art, a punch was no longer a punch. And then now that I understand the art, a punch is just a punch. If my understanding of this is saying, before you understand a concept, it's just a concept, or before this talk, prioritization might have just been some vague concept in your mind. Now that you know some of these frameworks, you're like, prioritization isn't just coming up with a list. It involves many more steps. So you need to really think about each of those steps. But once you master those steps, prioritization is just prioritization again. So it's something that comes naturally, something that you don't really think about consciously, but you've taken it in and it becomes a part of your unconscious thinking and thought process.